Now, I might make the title of this video, I might direct it to be deliberately eye-catching, which is not something I often do, but I would like this video to be seen, so I might do that. Today is the 5th of November, well, technically it's just turned the 6th, but the 5th of November, and in the UK, specifically in England, that is an important date. If you've seen the film V for Vendetta, you might have some idea what it's about. Remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. That is, of course, referring to Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes was the most famous of the plotters, but he was not the only one. In fact, it was led by a man called William Catesby. There were others, Thomas Windsor, and so on. It's one of the best remembered of British historical episodes, so to speak. And basically, without giving a history lesson, it was a plot just over 400 years ago, in the year 1605, to violently overthrow the new king by blowing up the Houses of Parliament, which would have been a large-scale massacre. I mean, there's no doubt about it. By modern standards, this would have been a major terrorist attack. It would have killed the king and all of his ministers. But basically the plot got uncovered because a cousin of, I believe it was Thomas Winter or Guy Fawkes himself, basically blew the whistle on them, and the conspirators got found out. Guy Fawkes was the most famous because he was the mastermind behind the gunpowder. He was the expert. But they were a group of Catholic radicals who didn't like the way the country was going and wanted to kill the new king, King James VI of Scotland and James I of England. He was also the first joint monarch, incidentally. But basically, what this strikes me, the reason I want to make this is I've just come across an article on yet another lèse-majesté case that is being prosecuted in Thailand. Without reading the whole story, I'll just read the first paragraph. A Thai student was sentenced to 5 years in jail Tuesday for posting comments on Facebook deemed insulting to the Southeast Asian nation's revered monarchy. Prai Chathai reported that Akaradej, a 24-year-old undergraduate student in Mahanakorn University of Technology, doesn't say if that's in Bangkok or somewhere else, had his sentence reduced to 2.5 years as he had pleaded guilty to the offence. How merciful. The defendant was arrested on June the 18th at his university dormitory after a complaint was filed by a fellow Facebook user in March. Akaradej initially denied the charges before pleading guilty in September. Now, the reason I'm tying these two things in is, whilst in the UK we don't have anything like lèse-majesté or 112, at least certainly not prosecuted in law, I do think it is a little bit peculiar why we commemorate Guy Fawkes Night, and I've never quite understood whether we're celebrating the failure of the plots or whether we're celebrating the fact that these young men were radical and tried to kill the king. I've never quite understood what the actual celebration is, but all over England people like bonfires and little fireworks. It's a big cultural event. I have no opposition to it, by the way. I've seen no problem with it, but we do maybe need to look at some of the deeper issues in this. Britain today is still a monarchy, but we are in no way an absolute monarchy. I can say fuck the Queen, and I can rest well, sleep easy, knowing that nothing will happen to me. If this was Thailand, or Saudi Arabia, or Morocco, I would have to be extremely careful, because what I have just said would land me in jail. Now, I have been very outspoken in Thailand's 112 laws, and it's become personal at points. I've made other videos about that, so I'm not going to talk at length specifically about that country. The reason I focus on Thailand rather than absolute monarchies like Saudi Arabia and Morocco is because there's no denial that they are absolute monarchies. Thailand is supposedly a constitutional monarchy. Now, since Prayuth has become Prime Minister earlier this year, since his coup d'etat, Thailand has basically become a dictatorship. Dissidents have been persecuted, and 112 cases have shot through the roof. They were prosecuted before this, even under Yingluck Shinawatra, who was supposed to be a reformer. Many people were disappointed that she didn't abolish 112. But the problem in Thailand is the situation is such that even if she had touched that, she herself would have been accused of 112. 112, if you don't know, is an article in the Thai Penal Code that is basically a brutal attack on free speech. Suppose that it's designed to protect the monarchy, whatever that means, but basically it just means if you have an opinion in Thailand perceived to be anti-monarchy, doesn't matter whether it is or isn't, if it's perceived to be anti-monarchy, you'll end up in jail. Now what this young man or young woman, I'm not sure, doesn't specify, but what this student got 2.5 years, whilst extremely harsh, is actually quite lenient by Thai standards. Some victims of lèse-majesté have been jailed for up to 15 years. Foreigners generally get very lenient treatment, which is to say the king pardons them. I think one reason this might be escalating is because the king is in very poor health. In Thailand there's a personality cult around the king. He is revered. Now, I'm not going to weigh into whether he's a good or bad king, because that will get me into hot water with Thai royalists. I don't give a shit about 112 because I'm in Britain right now, so I'm not subject to Thai law. But I don't want to waste time discussing whether he's a good king or bad king. That's up to the Thai people to decide. What I take issue with is a brutal attack on free expression. And the reason I'm linking this into Guy Fawkes Night in Britain, whilst obviously there isn't a direct connection, is that we must never ever ever lose sight of the fact in Britain that we were also once an absolute monarchy, where people could also be jailed simply for having an opinion against the monarchy. James I was a dictator. He was not a good king, in the sense that, I mean, this was a man who believed in burning people as witches. Let's not forget that. So whilst Guy Fawkes and so on may well have been terrorists by today's standards, James I was no innocent victim. He was a dictator. And I would argue every pre-Glorious Revolution monarch in this country was a dictator in their own right. They may have had achievements, but by definition they were dictators because they had absolute power and no one could question them. I would even go so far as to say our best monarch, Elizabeth I, was a dictator. You couldn't question her without facing punishment. Yes, she was a great monarch. She defended the nation, she had a lot of achievements, but she was by definition a dictator. Now, again, in Thailand, saying that would get me in prison. In fact, I believe an academic did face a lèse-majesté charge recently, not for offending the current king, but offending, I think the king he supposedly offended was a king who was around in the 1860s. I forget his name now. I forget. Apologies, I forget the name, but I'm not apologising, by the way, for lèse-majesté. I'm just apologising because I can't remember. But that academic was prosecuted simply for saying that person was a bad king. Now, in my opinion, Thailand needs to come under a lot more international scrutiny. I just saw a CNN ad last night promoting Thailand. Why is that happening when Thailand is brutally attacking freedom of expression? Thailand should be falling under much more international scrutiny because the human rights situation there is gradually getting worse and worse, especially regarding free expression. So the reason I'm tying these two things in is simply because it is the 5th of November. We need to think that around the world, in countries like Thailand, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Jordan, people are persecuted simply for having an opinion on the monarchy. This is an abomination. And as a monarchy ourselves, we should have the backbone, as a constitutional monarchy, to speak out and say this is wrong. But I doubt any British politician is going to do that. Not because we have lèse-majesté, but because we have trade links with those countries, and it's very unfortunate. We don't have lèse-majesté. And that's not to say the freedom of speech situation in Britain is perfect. Far from it. But at the very least, we can criticise the monarchy. Now, if the royals were absolute in this country, no doubt they would introduce such laws. So it is right that they cannot interfere in politics. And they must be reminded that they will not be in a position where they will get any serious political power. And unfortunately, they're in a situation where they're so. I've nothing against Prince William or Princess Catherine. I think Prince William's a decent man. He does decent things. But they need to be aware that the system is constitutional for a reason. So whenever a member of the British royal family, or any royal family for that matter, uses the word democracy, they need to remember that involves freedom of expression, including the right to criticise them, because their ministers have to put up with criticism, so should they. And I'm not saying that they don't, but I mean the Royal Channel, for example, disables comments on YouTube, so that just shows that if they were given half a chance, we would be an absolute monarchy again. So fuck them if they think that is ever going to happen. And this isn't designed to be a crude attack on monarchy. I mean, I don't think it's particularly productive for vitriolic Republicans to talk about their hatred of the Queen. I don't think that's particularly productive. But likewise, sycophantic royalists in this country, I say shame on you. Shame on you for defending any sort of absolutism when there are people in the world persecuted for simply having a view. Thank goodness we don't have it in Britain. So this is not to celebrate Guy Fawkes, but it's just to remind people that James I was an absolute monarch, a dictator.